what Reverend Michael would teach us in homiletics class, to have somebody hype you up before you go. And you did that, girl. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. That really means a lot. Not just to my ego. Of course, it enjoys it, but that's my purpose. Ministry. There were always invitations and there were always fears. What happened with me was when Spirit literally took me into its awareness and showed me what could never be put into words. Ministry for me is intentional service and complete expression. Yes is my soul's response to what I'm given. My yes is so deep now that it has its own force, a direct path to my essence. The invitations came early on. There was some degree of yes there all along. I have a recollection of being open. Some might say I was naive. The fear eventually brought the no's. Some fears came from experience, some from admonishment from others. I'm not sure what brought the nun's slamming paddle on my butt or another nun's cracking a ruler on my knuckles. I wasn't alone. I knew it was punishment. I know now that discipline was the reason that parents sent their children to Catholic schools, but I'm not sure they taught us discipline. They taught us fear. There's a kindergarten picture on Facebook where I'm 5 years old and I look like a deer in the headlights on my class picture. I didn't post that. Another one of my kindergarten classmates did. What I recall most is the contradictions to what I knew in my soul. What they told me about God wasn't the God that I knew. For instance, I couldn't digest the notion that babies would go to purgatory when they died because of something called mortal sin. The propaganda was that we all had to pay for the sin of being immortal. Adam and Eve mostly got the rap for it. And somehow after that, we were all guilty. I must have raised my hand because it did not sit well with me. This was not the God that I knew. Something was awry. They didn't like that very much when I disputed what they said. I remember little girls who said they wanted to be nuns and they created little habits for them and would take pictures of them. I remember the idea of wanting to serve God, but not liking that nun choice, what it would mean to my life. It was one of those calls to ministry, but it was not a yes. I never liked the crucifix. It was always difficult for me to understand why a father who loved his son would subject him to that cruelty. The fear of crucifixes did not go away. As a young adult traveling in Europe, the crucifixes were scarier than any I had seen. The grander the cathedrals, it seems, the more horrific the crucifixes. And today, I am still not altogether comfortable passing the crucifix here in Chicago or Madison near Clark Street. In fact, I was interviewing for a job that was just across the street from the crucifix, and I was very relieved that I did not get that job. The message is, life is about suffering, and you will be punished for your disobedience to the authorities. I feel so much for Yeshua's pain. That's Jesus' real name, Yeshua. It breaks my heart to see it. The message was that you were doomed to be punished because you are a sinner. So ministry was not appealing. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination and the previous beatdowns of him and his followers were not appealing as a ministry. I liked very much what he stood for, but that kind of ministry was not to be for me, I thought. I do recall a devout practice of attending church every day in Lent around 1967, and I would receive the sacrament. And there was an access to the divine that enchanted me. I had sex early in the 70s. I smoked reefers, and experimented with acid, THC, and cocaine in the mid 70s. I had become queer by the late 70s. I found many ways to sin by the Catholic's definition. And they clearly showed me their immorality and criminality when I worked for the Mayor's Office of Manpower. Because I was a Catholic girl, they assigned me to the Archdiocese. Let's just say they weren't on the up and up. And based on that hypocrisy, they were no longer to be my guide. I had officially, by their standards, become a sinner. After all, they told me that's who I was from the start. I tried Buddhist chanting, being baptized in the pool by Baptists, no religion, and joining the first African Methodist Episcopal Church in Los Angeles. I was actively serving in community while connecting with my culture. It was where I met Rosa Parks, such a genteel lady. I was aligning with my religious self and social justice, and that felt good. I had heard about agape from friends for several years in the late 80s to early 90s, but I did not want to mix my church with my entertainment career. There was too much Hollywood up in agape, and I wasn't trying to go there. It wasn't until 1997 when my multi-million-dollar film deal in Canada fell through, the story of a police brutality cover-up, because I couldn't get a US distribution company to distribute a film about police brutality on Black people. Fancy that. I was so depressed, and an actress friend of mine invited me to go to church at Agape. And I went. The clear feeling of unconditional love was there. A connection to community was there. A creative community was there. And a message was there that allowed me to breathe. There was no mention of sinning, no guilt, no shaming. And a truth was being revealed that was indisputable. I hungered for more. I took a foundations class. When Reverend Nirvana went around the room asking why we were here, my response was, because it's where God wants me to be. Since God wanted me in ministry, that was a perfect place for me. I still didn't know that then. I still didn't realize ministry was mine. And I have no idea why I said that. I was clear that spiritual study was something I hungered for and would be excited by everything that I learned. I took to the science of mind principles like water to my body. As complex as they might seem to people, there was a dimension of me that clearly was aligned. I'm sure it's because it's based on ancient wisdom. My maternal grandmother died a few weeks after that foundation class. I was the designated presenter at the family funerals because of my theatrical background. That weekend, the veil lifted, and I got all kinds of messages from Spirit. Heaven cracked open my mind. Look at this book. Look at that scripture. My ancestors came to me, feeding me information. In fact, they stayed with me. And there was something directly downloading what I needed to say. As I gave my tribute, the word obedient came out of my mouth. I played it off like I didn't have on my glasses. I couldn't see what was on the page. But it was confirmation that I had been obedient. The response to that talk was phenomenal. It surprised me. When I was done, the minister assigned to the service said I had done the eulogy. Oops. As I was leaving, someone said, "There goes the minister." It kind of shocked me a little bit. My mother relayed to me later that someone asked her if I was going to be a minister, and she told them no. And I said to her, "Let's not say no right now," because I knew something was happening. I kept taking classes, and when the basic classes were over, they had a practitioner preview to ask questions to see whether or not you wanted to show up for practitioner training. When I found out it was about service, I knew I could do it. I know service. I embrace service. In service, I'm tireless. Before I went through practitioner training, I was already doing ministry. I ran the New Light Review Roadshow, where I would take entertainers, singers, belly dancer, girls on 10-foot stilts, guitarists, all kinds of performers with me as I gave a message and performed a poem or two or a monologue. We would go to senior citizen facilities, children's hospitals, and Terminal Island Federal Prison. The elders would get out of their wheelchairs. The little boy on a stretcher would sit up and talk about courage. All kinds of miracles occurred. Something was going on, and I loved it. I can't remember what class it was. It might have been self-mastery. We were in pods at Agape because there were so many people. A pod might consist of up to 10 people. And I remember opening my mouth in a pod one day, and what came out was incredible. I did not know the things that I was saying. And everyone around me in my pod looked at me with wonder and their jaws dropped. I didn't understand it. But I do remember the night before feeling that I was going down a very deep abyss and making a conscious decision to stay on earth. I came to know that something was in charge, other than me. And it was amazing. My prayers prayed me. I worked the prayer line at Agape from my second year of practitioner training through acquiring my license and beyond. I was part of the team to reestablish the live prayer ministry for what was then the United Church of Religious Science. It had started at Founders Church many years, decades ago, and then it was being revived at the Burbank office of Centers for Spiritual Living. I worked there throughout my ministerial training. When I came to Chicago to open my center in Hyde Park, no one would ask for prayer. I was like, what? So I called the prayer ministry and asked them to send me a phone. I prayed for people around the world, and it was my honor. My ministry has been interesting. I continue to do my Agape Inner Visions writing, as I started doing once I became an Agape licensed practitioner. By the way, I graduated from Agape in the morning and Centers for Spiritual Living in the afternoon. That's another story I won't get into. There's only 2 people in the world, I think, that can say that. I had asked Reverend Michael to come to my CSL graduation, and he did. He had just separated from CSL. I asked him to help my mom place my master's collar on me, and he did. So as quiet as it's kept, I am an Agape minister as well. People did eventually start asking for prayer, and I did start to develop a client base of people coming to me for spiritual counseling. And my ministry has been more than that in the pulpit. I've come to know that ministry is everything I do. As a visioning facilitator for Centers for Spiritual Living, I introduced many new thought centers to the practice of visioning. In the work that I did for CSL around diversity, equity, and inclusion, that was a ministry. In the ways that I show up for people in the workplace, that's my ministry. And I encourage ministerial students. I'm asked to speak with ministerial students who have a requirement to take a diversity class. I professed that my ministry was about stimulating minds and engaging hearts. When I'm writing, it's my ministry. When I'm teaching and giving workshops, that's my ministry. In the odd jobs that I do, being in an airport, traveling on planes, I do ministry. Yes, I've pastored 3 Centers for Spiritual Living communities. Those are talks in and of themselves. Before coming to Miracles Live 365, I would teach a course in miracles on Facebook Live, and I had previously taught it at Power of Oneness. I continue to learn as a minister. I've been studying with Dr. Will Coleman, everything from unity principles to expanded Kabbalah lessons to African spirituality to learning the symbolism and substances of Hebrew, Latin, and Greek languages to tarot to hoodoo. We are in an intense hoodoo class right now, so you'll probably start hearing more things that you've not heard me say before because it's already started. I study with him because he continues to connect me with that dimension of myself that is my ancestors. And so I know that's my core. So I have a visceral connection there that I'm able to sense my spiritual history deeply. I feel like since my ordination in 2009, I continued to be ordained because I continue to maintain my commitment to ministry. Howard Thurman said, commitment means that it is possible for a man, woman, to yield the nerve center of her consent to a purpose or a cause, a movement or an ideal, which may be more important to her than whether she lives or dies. The commitment is a self-conscious act of will by which she affirms her identification with what she is committed to. The character of her commitment is determined by that to which the center or core of her consent is given. I know that's saying a lot, but it really comes down to yes. It really comes down to a voluntary yes, that's beyond something conscious. It really comes down to connecting with purpose. And I know A Course in Miracles talks a lot about purpose. It's essentially love in expression. Being the event coordinator for Celebrating Our Soul, a New Thought Conference by People of African Descent, is a ministry for me. This event that's coming up August 11th through 14th down at Unity Village. As a member of the planning team, we're creating content for healing many aspects of our lives. Not only for African Americans in New Thought, but for everyone in New Thought. Religiosity does not make you immune from the creepy egoic dominations of the world. It just gives you pretty language to cover your misguided and unhealed habits. This event is such a healing that is renewing hope for many people who've been forlorn. It is giving non-Black people a way to heal from the guilt and shame of their past blind spots. It is a means by which we can all do self-care and support each other in being in our joy. Everyone who is committed to being in service there is equally committed to our own self-discovery and true empowerment. It's really a very special event. I've been driven to work on it. Oftentimes when I'm in the midst of doing something else, I feel that it's part of my ministry because it pulls together my production background, my speaking, my event planning, my team building, my eye for details, my visionary aptitude, and my love for people. My love for New Thought as a whole and my love for people of African descent is part of the fabric of who I am. And so it is my joy to be in this significant role. I am gratified and charged up when I hear people say, I've been praying for this, or I'm so excited, or there are so many great workshops to choose from. How can I possibly only choose 3? It gives people something to look forward to in a time of challenge. It gives people hope in these times of despair. I admit there are times when I am more consensual to spirit than other times. I'm continually surprised by my yes. I'm surprised when the Black Madonna rises in me, thrilled really. I'm grateful when the divine feminine calls me to serve as she leaves her imprint on my soul. I'm grateful when the Course continues to open my eyes over and over again to the depths of my being. I personally have never been able to read the Course on a surface level. It is like taking a direct shot to my soul. It's like caffeine to stimulate my awareness of who I am beyond ego. It continues to break down the walls of separation in my mind. I have healed many relationships, and I'm in the process of healing more relationships where I become aware of my perception of separation. When I left Oakland and wasn't sure where I was headed, a message clearly came through to do the Course. I had stopped doing it for about 6 months during the last part of my ministry in Oakland. And I really had some forgiveness work to do after leaving Oakland. And I discovered that I could not keep it out of my life. Then Maureen called and asked me to teach the Course for Speakeasy. My forgiveness work must continue because it keeps me in touch with who I am. Howard Thurman talks about the dust and grit of the journey in his book, Meditations of the Heart. I often refer to it like at my ordination. He says in part, despite the dullness and barrenness of the days that pass, if I search with due diligence, I can always find a deposit left by some former radiance. But I had forgotten. At the time, it was full-orbed, glorious, and resplendent. And I was sure I would never forget. In the moment of its fullness, I was sure that it would illumine my path for all the rest of my journey. I had forgotten how easy it is to forget. He goes on to talk about how the details, the lower level demands, wear and tear crept in. There had been no direct challenge. If there had been, he would have fought it to the end and beyond. His prayer is simply, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve. Often remember that when I start to feel a little bit of a disconnect. I just know the ministry work is surrender. And that prayer, keep fresh before me the moments of my high resolve, is a reminder to surrender to Elohim, to the presence beyond the distractions. We unconsciously make many things gods in our lives. And the most dangerous thing about that is that it disconnects us from being the God that we are. I invite you to stay connected to a teaching that is restorative, to a practice that sustains your connection with the presence, and a study that keeps you in touch with your authentic self. It will support you in any and everything. Namaste.